Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Community of the Mountains. I'm delighted to be standing up here as your worship associate for the first time in about 9 years. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm Sophia McKean. I grew up at UUCM and I just moved back and rejoined the worship committee for the first time since I was in high school. Today, we're continuing our exploration of the Enneagram. The Enneagram, in case you're not familiar with it, is a personality type self-assessment tool. It's an invitation towards self-reflection. This Sunday, we're laying the groundwork. It takes intention to engage in meaningful self-examination, and so this Sunday is about how we get to and hold that intent. When Kevin and I were planning this service, we talked a lot about the idea of the path down which self-reflection leads us. This path is not some roadmap into a predictable future. It actually takes us back. It's a return to ourselves. The hope is if we are able to set and sit with clear intention, if we are able to be present with ourselves and with the world, this path will lead us back to ourselves and will find us with an expanded capacity to greet ourselves anew, to recognize and honor more completely the great expanse of who we are. Self-reflection may not give us a clear roadmap into a perfect future, but it will help us greet that uncertain future with a renewed sense of joy and curiosity for what it could bring. So today, I invite your presence. I invite each of you to bring the full contradictions of all of yourself to this service. Here at UUCM, we welcome and we hold one another in our totality. Come, let us worship together. Our wisdom for all ages this morning is The Locksmith, a Sufi teaching tale from Idries Shah. Once there lived a metal worker, a locksmith, who was unjustly accused of crimes and was sentenced to a deep, dark prison. After he had been there a while, his wife, who loved him very much, went to the king and beseeched him that she might at least give him a prayer rug so he could observe his 5 prostrations every day. The king considered this a lawful request, so he let the woman bring her husband a prayer rug. The prisoner was thankful to get the rug from his wife, and every day he faithfully did his prostrations on the rug. Much later, the man escaped from prison, and when people asked him how he got out, he explained that after years of doing his prostrations and praying for deliverance from the prison, he began to see what was right in front of his nose. One day, he suddenly saw that his wife had woven into the prayer rug the pattern of the lock that imprisoned him. Once he realized this and understood that all the information he needed to escape was already in his possession, he began to make friends with the guards. He also persuaded the guards that they all would have a better life if they cooperated and escaped the prison together. They agreed since, although they were guards, they realized that they were in prison too. They all wished to escape, but they had no means to do so. So, the locksmith and his guards decided on the following plan. They would bring him pieces of metal, and he would fashion useful items from them to sell in the marketplace. Together, they would amass resources for their escape, and from the strongest piece of metal they could acquire, the locksmith would fashion a key. One night, when everything had been prepared, the locksmith and his guards unlocked the prison and walked out into the cool night, where his beloved wife was waiting for him. He left the prayer rug behind so that any other prisoner who was clever enough to read the pattern of the rug could also make his escape. Thus, the locksmith was reunited with his loving wife, his former guards became his friends, and everyone lived in harmony. Love and skillfulness prevailed. I'm coming to you all fresh on the heels of heartbreak. 2 years ago, I fell in love and moved to live with my girlfriend in Philadelphia. 2 months ago, we broke up and I moved home. One of the things that struck me is how similar the experiences of love and heartbreak can feel. When I fell in love, it was like coffee tasted better and sunsets were more vivid. And suddenly I was really excited to go to the farmer's market and buy some peaches and make a pie, even though I had never before in my life baked a pie. Love is this big, infectious emotion that spills out into reveling in the everyday joys in life. That can fade into a more quiet comfort as you settle into a longer term relationship with someone. But then, after this breakup, I found myself walking the streets of Philadelphia and once again marveling at the bird songs and the varieties of conversation and laughter coming from the people around me. Sadness, like joy, can feel like it takes the whole world to contain. To be able to sit with it pouring into everything, it helps to catch and hold those moments of everyday beauty. Love and heartbreak, opening yourself up to another person and opening up to yourself, it all goes hand in hand. Sadness is a big blue ribbon wrapped throughout the straw hat of joy. The whole thing sort of falls apart if you try to separate one from the other. It might have been easier not to fall in love or easier not to let myself feel the immensity of that loss now. But if I close myself off to the loss, I lose the bird song too. I lose the taste of coffee in the morning and how much a sunset can strike me at night. As I said in my opening words, this service is about returns. Returning doesn't have to mean reverting. Take it from me, I've moved back home, but things feel different. I quit my office job to try vegetable farming, learned how to change a tire, and I've deeply re-engaged with church for the first time in a few years. If I hadn't had the experiences I did, both the love and the heartbreak, I think my life here would look and feel very different. I let myself sit with my emotion and it opened up the world to me. But I think the inverse is also true. Sitting with the world can open up our own interiority. So this is an invitation from someone who's heartbroken and really enjoying the taste of coffee. It's, it's an invitation to find that cup of coffee or that heartbreak, whichever comes to you first, and to take it with you, sit out on the porch, and see where it leads. Thank you.
Beautiful, Sophia. Thank you. What a joy. What a joy. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the music, including our guest singers this morning. Thank you for being here. And Toby. And in case you don't know, Sophia's parents are in the choir. So they're right here and kind of beaming. And appropriately so. Appropriately so. I spoke last week of the spiritual path being not a path of changing who we are, not a path of becoming someone else, but the path of coming to terms with and accepting who we are more deeply and more completely in ways that liberate our most true self, that self that's buried beneath the layers of habit and unconscious reactions that we took on, usually very early in life, to protect ourselves. I named some of the truths that we forget or fall asleep to along the way. The Garden of Eden story, you know, Adam, Eve, garden, tree, snake, apple, yum, naked, go. That story is typically framed as a story of humanity getting kicked out of the garden for disobeying God and for awakening to the truth of good and evil. Another way of framing that story is to understand it as a metaphor for forgetting who we really are. The fall, as it's known, not a fall from grace or a fall from God's love and light, but a falling asleep to the divine within us, to the full Garden of Eden that we carry within us the whole time, the home of abundance we never really left. With that framing, the spiritual path is one of finding our way home, of returning to who we already are, to the homeland of our soul, as we sang last week and as Sophia spoke to so beautifully. Today, I want to extend the invitation to discover or to tend to your particular path, to find in your day-to-day life and living your cups of coffee and your heartbreak, in your choices and your experience, all that's right beneath you, the keys to your own liberation. As Sophia put it, this is an invitation to sit with the world, to be present to what is, and to let your own interiority open up. No matter our particular religious proclivities, whether we lean Buddhist or Christian or pagan or atheist, the first and the continual movement on the spiritual or growth path is, first of all, to observe ourselves and to notice who we are, how we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and how we're behaving moment by moment. To notice, to look, to observe. The journey begins by being willing to look at and to look into ourselves, by cultivating awareness, this ability to be aware, to learn to be more awake in our lives in moment to moment, without judgment, without excuse, and with a whole lot of kindness and compassion. Just, oh, look at that. The goal is to catch ourselves in the act of being on automatic pilot, to notice while it's happening that we're being driven by some unseen, unconscious energy, as if we had no choice, as if something outside of us is controlling us. Now, I very stubbornly like to think that I am in control of my behavior. Thank you. But as time goes on, I'm more and more aware and humbled by the fact that, as Don Riso and Russ Hudson put it, many times it's as if a 3-year-old were making decisions for me. Traditional Christian understanding has often framed this as the work of the devil, but I believe it's the work of a 3-year-old. Much more approachable, I think. Do you have any behaviors that you know are not helpful, not smart, not wise, not good for you, not good for the relationship, and yet, even knowing this, you do them anyway? Do you ever find yourself thinking, oh, this is not a good idea. I should not eat a 4th piece of cake, or write that email right now while I'm pissed, or say yes when I really mean no, or I really need some sleep. It would be smart not to watch one more episode of whatever it is that you're hooked on. Or do you ever discover that you flare up or lash out or zone out or disappear or distract yourself or putter away an entire afternoon on some completely unnecessary escapist activity before you even realize that that's what you're doing? Familiar, anyone? We each have our own variations, and that's the point. Being willing and able to observe ourselves in the act begins to make a difference in this spiritual, emotional journey. Finding just that little bit of distance that's needed in order to be able to watch ourselves in action as if from the outside, it already begins to help us separate from the automatic behavior. Well, you look at that. That's the starting place. And in fact, it's the bulk of the journey forever. It's about seeing and befriending that tender 3-year-old in us who is calling the shots. There's an important place along the way, then, for learning to understand why that 3-year-old is calling the shots that way. They had very good reasons when we were young. And there's an important place for becoming willing to stay with the discomfort and the fear that comes up when we see what's going on in us and we don't run away, as well as a place for feeling the deep grief that comes with realizing that we have been asleep to who we are all this time, missing out on deep pieces of what makes us us. There is deep grief that comes with that. There's an important place for learning that we have much more choice and flexibility than we realized, that we can free ourselves from a cell that has long held us. But the greatest part of the journey, and in fact, the key itself, is learning to see, to notice, to get curious about, and then try to learn to be present to what's happening in us as it's happening, moment by moment. Look at that. Oh my gosh, look at that. I can't believe I did it again. Look at that. I found the Enneagram to be one very helpful map or guidebook on the journey. It doesn't tell us where we have to go, but it helps us see where we are, and it helps us see the territory around us and where we might want to go. For reasons that I named last Sunday, I think the Enneagram is particularly helpful in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. It's a map that has room for the whole range of religious, spiritual, emotional, and psychological understandings we hold here, or try to hold here, all in one community. I know many of you have already explored the Enneagram deeply and have a start on figuring out which of the 9 personality patterns is most strong for you. Remember, we each have all 9 of those aspects in us, so we can identify with each of those 9 patterns to some degree and at different times. I'll share at the end some ways you might go exploring if this is new to you, if you wish. And if you weren't here last Sunday, I encourage you to watch the service on YouTube. You can get there right from UUCM's homepage, the webpage. There's a button right there to click on View Past Services. Today, in the context of finding your path, I'll offer just a tiny thread into each pattern and offer Riso and Hudson's suggestions for what they call a spiritual jumpstart, a beginning place, if you're looking for one, to focus your attention and awareness, a start, a place to notice when and where you are living a pattern that's driving you. So as we go, see which of these, if any, feel like they might speak to your experience. So here's the first slide, Paul. Point 8. Oh, some people are smiling already. The challenger, the leader, the protector, the provider, among other things, among many other things. The powerful type who lost touch with their own innate strength. They lost touch that they had that innate strength. And so whose basic fear is of being harmed or controlled by others, of becoming weak or vulnerable, of losing independence, who learn to project strength and power and to hide their vulnerability, whose basic desire in life is to feel strong and alive, to protect themselves, to determine their own course in life, who internalize the message, you are good or okay if you are strong and in control of the situation. To see your 8-ness in you, notice trying to force or control your life. There's one starting place to focus attention and watch when you're trying to force or control your life. Anybody want to self-identify as an 8? A few ready people, 8's in the mix. Point 9, the peacemaker, healer, reconciler, optimist, among other things. The pleasant, self-effacing type who lost touch with their own innate, God-given wholeness, and so whose basic fear, because they lost touch with the wholeness, is of being disconnected and cut off. who learn to blend in with other people and their wants and to substitute small comforts for the real priorities, to settle for that bundt cake instead of love, for example, whose basic desire is to maintain an inner stability, an inner tranquility, an inner peace of mind. Would you leave the slides up, Paul? Thanks. Who internalize the message that you are good or okay as long as you are at peace and those around you are okay, then you're okay. To see your nineness, notice resisting being affected by your experiences, even the good ones, right? We're going to stay so super calm, nothing's going to ruffle us, even happiness. We're going to stay super calm. 9. Anyone else want to identify their nineness? My good company. Point 1, the reformer, the teacher, the crusader, the perfectionist, among other things, the rational, idealistic type who lost touch with their own innate or God-given goodness, and so whose basic fear is of being wrong or bad or defective or condemnable or chaotic, who learned that people are not accepted for who they are, that good behavior is taken for granted and bad behavior and impulses are judged and punished, whose basic desire, therefore, is to be good, virtuous, correct, to have integrity, who internalize the message that you are okay if you are good and you do what is right or correct. To see your oneness, notice value judging, whether you're condemning yourself or others. Anyone want to self-identify as a one? Around the room. Point 2, the helper, altruist, lover, caretaker, pleaser, among other things. The caring, interpersonal type who lost touch with their own innate or God-given love and lovability and sweetness, and so whose basic fear is of being unloved and unwanted for being themselves alone, who learn to get their personal needs fulfilled by being needed, by giving and then expecting to be seen and appreciated for it, kind of a substitute for love, being indispensable, whose basic desire is to feel love and to be a source of love in the world, who internalize the message that you are good and okay if you are loving and close to others. To see your two-ness, notice giving your value away to others. Anyone want to self-identify as a 2? Look at the beautiful spread we have going. Point 3, the achiever, the motivator, the status and image seeker, the adaptable and success-oriented type, who lost touch with their own innate or God-given value, and whose basic fear is of being worthless, without value apart from their achievements, as if they'll be rejected if they're not admirable, who learn to get love and approval by achieving success, by working hard to be the best, by maintaining a good image, whose basic desire is to feel valuable and worthwhile, who internalize the message that you are good or okay if you are successful and others think well of you. To see your 3-ness, notice trying to be other than who you authentically are. Anyone want to self-identify as a 3? Point 4, the individualist, the artist, the romantic, the melancholic, the aesthete, among other things, who's lost touch with their own innate or God-given identity and depth, and so whose basic fear is of having no identity or personal significance, who learn to search for an ideal love or a perfect circumstance in order to feel loved and whole and complete, who feel longing or envy for what seems to be missing in themselves or their own life, whose basic desire in life is to find their own true self and their personal significance, who internalize the message that you are good or okay if you feel something and are true to yourself. To see your fourness, notice making negative comparisons, even if you're on the receiving end of that negative. Anyone want to self-identify as a 4? Some 4s in the room. Point 5, the investigator, thinker, observer, innovator, expert, among other things, who lost touch with their own innate and God-given clarity and illumination, and so whose basic fear is of not being able to know what's real and true, of being lost in ignorance, or that they're fearing that their intelligence and perception are not enough, who learn to protect themselves from intrusive demands by becoming very private and self-sufficient, by limiting their desires, by accumulating knowledge, because that's going to be the answer, whose basic desire is to understand reality, to uncover the essence of things, who internalize the message that you are good or okay if you know and have mastered something. To see your 5ness, notice over-interpreting your experience, experiencing it in your head rather than in reality. Over-interpreting. Anyone want to self-identify as a 5? I have some good 5ness in me. Thank you. Point 6, the loyalist, true believer or doubter. Now this is interesting. 6s can go several different ways. One is toward being a true believer, like following authority, and the other is being a total doubter, rejecting authority. Often in our society, they're valued for being traditionalists and being stalwart. These are people who lost touch with their own innate and God-given awakeness and that sense of inner guidance, that they can know what to do. And so whose basic fear is of being lost, not having an orientation, not having support, not having guidance, who learn to be fearful in life, doubting, vigilant, and because of that, either went with it and learned to obey authority to find security and avoid hazards, or went totally against it, to defy authority, to defy security, to face those hazards, whose basic desire, either way, is to find some trustworthy orientation, to find support, to find security, to find guidance. People who internalize the message that you are good or okay if you are responsible and do what's expected of you. To see your 6ness, notice becoming dependent on something outside yourself for support and guidance. This doesn't mean we're totally independent. It means notice when you're dependent on something, as if you don't have any inner guidance. Anyone want to self-identify as a 6? Some hands go up right away. Point 7, one more here. The enthusiast, generalist, multitasker, connoisseur, the Wunderkind, who lost touch with their own innate or God-given joy and freedom, and so whose basic fear is of missing out. They're fearing deprivation, of being trapped in emotional pain, really. They have unmet needs that might take away from their freedom and their happiness, who learn to protect themselves from limitations and from pain by engaging in pleasurable activities, a whole lot of them, and becoming a glutton for interesting ideas and experiences that just keep going and going and going and going, whose basic desire is to be happy and free and satisfied and fulfilled, and they keep searching for it all over the place, who learn to internalize that message that you are good or okay if you are happy and if you're getting what you need. To see your 7ness, notice anticipating what you're going to do next instead of actually experiencing what you're doing. It's always in what's coming next. Notice that. Anybody want to self-identify as a 7? Slow rise. Yeah, pretty good spread. Not too many 3s, or at least people who recognize themselves as 3s. So I invite you to choose one pattern that you may have noticed in your life as we were going through those patterns, and to simply pay attention this month and get curious about it. With large doses of kindness and compassion, notice when you start doing that thing. Notice it while it's happening, and then notice how it started. What seemed to prompt it? And what happens then? Notice how you feel in the midst of it, in the midst of watching it unfold. So maybe it's value judging, condemning yourself and others. Or maybe it's noticing giving your value away to others. Or maybe it's noticing trying to be other than who you are authentically. Maybe it's noticing making negative comparisons. Maybe it's noticing that you're over-interpreting your experience. Maybe it's noticing that you're becoming dependent on something outside yourself for support and guidance, as if it couldn't come from in you. Maybe it's noticing that you're anticipating what you're going to do next instead of being with what's actually going on. Maybe it's noticing trying to force or control your life or your situation. Maybe it's resisting being affected by your experiences because you don't want to get ruffled. This is a rather didactic teaching kind of sermon. Scattered throughout the year, my intent is to look through each of the lens of each of the Enneagram types one at a time, in part to help understand ourselves and each other, and also to look out to the world and the challenges in our world and our lives, hoping that this might serve your spiritual journey, your emotional journey, your journey toward yourself. We're not likely to get to an overall general Enneagram workshop till midwinter probably, so if this Enneagram stuff intrigues you, I encourage you to go exploring. There's a lot out there. Whether you just go exploring via the internet or YouTube videos or podcasts, the library, your friends' houses, secondhand stores. There are tons of resources out there. Go exploring and keep watching in the e-chalice where I'll keep trying to put some additional tools for you. I find the free test at truity.com to be one of the most accessible and ready ways to get a start on finding your primary pattern. Remember, you're the one ultimately, the only one that can know what your pattern is. So the test doesn't put you there. It just gives you some idea of what it might be, and you go exploring from there. And I'll be looking for other ways I can support you in that search. Thanks, Paul. Meanwhile, I invite you to remember that this is a journey of self-acceptance, which cannot help but support other acceptance of others. You don't have to become someone you are not, and neither does anyone else. You're being invited to become more fully, more genuinely who you are beneath the patterns that once served you so well and helpfully, but that now get in your way. It may help of you to think of this as a spiritual journey toward the you that God created and intended. It may help you to think of this as a journey of personal growth toward the original you, the you that's not being driven by the wounds you've accumulated or that 3-year-old inside you, the you that's most open, most calmly responsive, most grounded and ready and whole no matter what. Or you may have your own kind of framing or understanding for this. My hope is that by giving some time and attention throughout this year, that it will indeed help you find some of those keys to unlock some of the doors that confine you, that confine the you that longs to be free and whole and loved and wanted and strong and peaceful and valuable and good and significant and true and clear and supported and guided and fulfilled. Little by little and more, may it be so. Adapting the words of Andrew Pakula, yes, let there be light of many kinds, starting with the light of our own awareness. May it illuminate our paths and fill our lives with well, if not always peace, a knowing that guides us gradually home. Yes, and let there be dark, for it is from our dark places that we are brought forward, tried and tested, and impelled toward growth. In these places, may we indeed realize compassion and kindness and learn to love ourselves as much as anyone. And there was day, and there was night, and there was joy, and there was sorrow, and there is all that we are glad for and about our quirky human selves, and all about ourselves that has us rolling our eyes or feeling frustrated or less than. It's all good, my friends. Not easy, not simple, but yes, it is good. You are good. It is all good.